the great American wilderness, vast, untamed, and brimming with beauty. But what happens when that beauty hides something else? Something older than time, older than the forests themselves. Beneath towering peaks and among the whispering pines, a ranger stumbles upon an abandoned campsite. The scene, disturbed, eerie, and wrong. Then, the disappearances begin. Across the country, in Great Smoky Mountains National Park, another ranger patrols the misty trails, only to uncover his own nightmare. Hikers speak of unsettling encounters, a presence just out of sight, and deep in the underbrush, clues to something that shouldn't exist at all. Step into the abyss, and welcome to Weird Encounters, a place where the ordinary fades into shadow and the unexplainable comes alive. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe, and join our ever-growing community of the curious. Your support is the lifeblood that keeps this channel alive. Now, prepare yourself, for what you're about to witness is not for the faint of heart. Out in the vast, untamed wilderness of Glacier National Park, where the mountains loom like ancient sentinels and the dense forest swallows the last light of day, strange things have been happening. Disappearances, eerie sightings, and a discovery that challenges everything we know about the creatures that call these lands home. In this story, we follow the account of a seasoned park ranger who stumbled upon something that should not exist, something the authorities don't want you to know about. I don't know if I should be telling this story, but after months of keeping it to myself, I need to get it off my chest. I've been working as a park ranger in Glacier National Park for the better part of 15 years. In that time, I've seen plenty of things most people wouldn't believe. Wildlife encounters gone wrong, hikers who vanished without a trace, footprints in the snow where no human or known animal should have been. But what I saw in 2022 is something I'll never forget, no matter how much I try. It started in September 2022, right at the end of the busy tourist season. Most of the summer visitors had packed up and gone home, and the park was settling into that eerie kind of quiet. It always does, before the first snowfall. It was a late afternoon when I was sent to check on a report of an abandoned campsite near Many Glacier, one of the more rugged and remote parts of the park. The site had been flagged by a backcountry permit officer, no recent activity, no checked-out hikers associated with it, yet it had clearly been used. When I arrived, the first thing I noticed was that the tent was slashed open from the outside, not torn by wind or an animal scavenging for food. This was deliberate, like something with claws or a blade had ripped through the fabric in long, jagged strokes. The sleeping bags were still inside, zipped up but empty, as if whoever had been there had disappeared in a hurry. The strangest part. There was no sign of struggle, no blood, no tracks leading away, just silence, as if the whole site had been frozen in time. I did a quick sweep of the area and radioed in my findings. Dispatch told me there were no missing persons reports in the region that fit the timeline. But something wasn't adding up. It felt wrong, unnatural, like I had just stepped into the scene of something that had gone horribly, inexplicably wrong. As I was about to leave, something caught my eye near the tree line. At first, I thought it was just the way the shadows were playing against the fading sunlight, but when I looked closer, I saw a shape. Tall. Too tall. At least 8 feet. It wasn't moving like a bear or any large mammal I've seen out here. It was standing still, like it was watching me. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but before I could move, it took one slow step forward. That's when I saw the head, elongated, almost like a wolf's, but with features that seemed somehow wrong, twisted, unnatural. I reached for my radio, but the second my hand moved, the thing bolted into the trees at a speed that wasn't human or animal. It was too fast, too quiet. The forest should have erupted in sound, twigs breaking, branches snapping under its weight, but there was nothing. Just the lingering sense that I had seen something I was never supposed to. I didn't sleep that night. I kept telling myself it was just a trick of the light, a bear on its hind legs, a lone wolf. But I knew better. The next morning, I went back with another ranger to investigate. We scoured the area but found no tracks, no fur, nothing, except for one thing. About 50 yards from the abandoned campsite, hidden under a cluster of fallen logs, we found a skull. Not a bear. Not a moose. Something else. It was massive, almost 3 feet in length, and didn't match any known species in the park. The bone was smooth, but the structure was all wrong, too thick in some places, too delicate in others, as if it belonged to something that had never been officially recorded. The eye sockets were deep and slanted, almost predatory, and the jaw structure suggested it had once been filled with long, serrated teeth. We immediately radioed it in. Within 2 hours, a team from the National Park Service arrived, along with 2 men who didn't identify themselves. They weren't wearing ranger uniforms, and they didn't ask the usual questions. Instead, they took the skull without a word and told us to clear the area. I pressed them, asking what we had just found, but one of them simply said, "This isn't your concern." And that was it. The skull was gone. No report, no record, nothing. Just another unsolved mystery swallowed by the wilderness. In the weeks that followed, things got even stranger. We started getting more reports from hikers, whispers of something big moving through the trees at night, a feeling of being watched while trekking the high trails, low growls in the distance that didn't match any known predator. One veteran hunter who had been tracking elk in the area for years told me flat out that he was never coming back. He claimed he had seen something massive, something walking on 2 legs, but it wasn't a bear, and it wasn't human. And then the disappearances started piling up. A solo hiker, last seen near Swift Current Pass, vanished without a trace. His gear was found intact, his food supply untouched, his footprints leading up the trail, and then suddenly stopping, as if he had been lifted off the ground. No drag marks, no animal signs. Just gone. A local guide reported his dog whimpering and refusing to go near a certain section of the forest, its ears pinned back, hackles raised. He swore he heard low breathing from the trees, but when he turned his flashlight on the area, there was nothing there. Even some of the older rangers, guys who had worked the park for decades, stopped going into the backcountry alone. One of them told me, "There's something out there, Greg, and we're not meant to find it." Now, I keep my mouth shut when I'm on duty. I've already been warned, subtly of course, that talking too much about what I saw isn't in my best interest. But I know what I saw, and I know that thing is still out there. I don't know what it is. An undiscovered predator? Something ancient? Something that's been here longer than we have? But it's watching, and it's hunting. If there's anyone else out there who has seen this thing or found evidence of something like it, I need to know. Because if this creature is real, and I know it is, we are not the top of the food chain in these woods. Deep within Yellowstone's rugged wilderness, where the mists swirl over geysers and ancient trees, a chilling secret lurks in the shadows. In this story, we hear from a seasoned park ranger whose encounter with an unspeakable creature and the discovery of something that hints at a forgotten terror forces us to confront a mystery far darker than any legend. I've sat with these memories for too long, and every time I try to put pen to paper, the words seem to scramble in my head, as if the forest itself is trying to erase what I witnessed. My name is Mike S., and for over 15 years, I've patrolled the vast stretches of Yellowstone National Park. I've seen the raw beauty of erupting geysers and the graceful dance of bison across the plains. But nothing prepared me for that October night in 2022, a night that nearly drove me to the brink of madness. It was late October and the air had turned bitter, the temperature plunging as an almost unnatural fog swallowed the landscape. I was on a routine patrol near the Little River area, a secluded section of the park that local lore claims is cursed by old spirits. Recently, there had been whispers among hikers and even some of my fellow rangers about strange figures lurking at the edge of vision and unexplainable sounds echoing through the pines. Then, that fateful week came when a young hiker disappeared along a rarely traveled trail near Clingman's Dome. His vanishing, along with several other unexplained disappearances, sent a shiver down my spine. That night, I set out into the damp, shadowed trails, every step heavy with foreboding. The fog was so thick I could barely see my own hand in front of my face. As I moved deeper into the forest, the usual sounds of night were muted, as if the woods had suddenly gone silent in anticipation. My flashlight beam cut a thin swath of light through the darkness, revealing only twisted silhouettes of ancient trees and moss-draped boulders. I wasn't alone. Every rustle in the underbrush felt like a whisper, every gust of wind like a warning. After what felt like hours of searching, I came upon a rocky outcrop near Deep Creek. There, partially buried in the soft, wet earth and entangled in creeping vines, lay a giant skull. I remember my breath catching as I knelt down. This skull was enormous, nearly 3 feet in diameter, with a high, arching brow that gave it an almost regal yet grotesque appearance. Its deep, hollow eye sockets seemed to glow faintly with an eerie, otherworldly light, and the jagged, uneven edges of its jaw hinted at a monstrous bite that defied any known creature in our records. I couldn't tell if it was fossilized or something more recent, but the unnatural luminescence clinging to it made my skin crawl. I immediately radioed in my find, but the response was nothing more than crackling static. I was left alone with the skull, and soon the forest seemed to close in around me. As I struggled to regain my composure, a series of disturbing reports began to filter in over the following days. Local hikers described seeing a tall, gaunt figure, its body impossibly thin, with limbs that elongated and twisted unnaturally, as it moved silently among the pines near Clingman's Dome. One group of backpackers told me that, at twilight, they caught sight of a creature with eyes like smoldering coals, its gaze so intense it seemed to burn through the fog. A seasoned hunter, a grizzled man from a nearby town, recounted hearing guttural roars and mournful cries in the dead of night, sounds that were part animal, part something far older and crueler. I also received an account from a woman who frequently hikes the isolated trails along Yellowstone's northern edge. In hushed, trembling tones, she described an encounter that nearly cost her her life. A moment when she found herself face to face with a massive silhouette that emerged from the shadows. Its face, if it could be called that, was a blur of sinewy muscle and distorted features, and its eyes shone with an unsettling intelligence that chilled her to the core. She claimed that as soon as she locked eyes with it, she felt an overwhelming surge of despair, as if the creature was peering into her very soul. The mystery deepened when I was summoned to a secure meeting at park headquarters. In a stark, cold conference room, I was grilled by high-ranking officials whose expressions were as inscrutable as the mists outside. They demanded every detail of my patrol that night. The fog's density, the sound of the creek, even the precise angle of the rocky ledge where I'd found that unearthly skull. Their questions were invasive and chilling. It was as though they feared the truth might spill out and shatter a carefully constructed silence. They made it abundantly clear that my findings were to be kept under wraps. I was warned, in no uncertain terms, that speaking of this event could jeopardize more than just my career. Their cold, measured tones and the threat in their eyes still haunt me to this day. After that meeting, anonymous tips started trickling in from within the Park Service. A retired ranger who wished to remain unnamed confided that he'd witnessed inexplicable electrical anomalies, strange, glowing orbs hovering just above the forest floor, and mentioned that a similar skull had been found years ago in a remote area of the park. Another source hinted at government cover-ups tied to these events, suggesting that the disappearances and the creature sightings were part of something much larger, a secret project or an ancient curse hidden from public knowledge. These accounts, coupled with my own experiences, painted a picture of a force that had haunted Yellowstone for centuries, an ancient cryptid that defied our modern understanding of nature. I've since tried to piece together these scattered fragments of evidence, but every lead seems to vanish like smoke in the wind. Local legends speak of the ancestor, a primordial being said to roam these wilds, a guardian or perhaps a harbinger of doom. Some even claim that its skull carries the mark of an ancient, cursed lineage, one that predates humanity itself. The thought is as fascinating as it is terrifying, and I've found myself tormented by the possibility that the creature responsible for these vanishings is not of this earth, but of a forgotten age. I continue to record these events in my private journal, though I've been cautioned, both implicitly and explicitly, to keep these writings out of public hands. The fear of attracting unwanted attention from those who wish to keep these secrets hidden is a constant, oppressive shadow over my everyday. Yet, I cannot remain silent. I have no clear answers, only a deepening sense of dread and a growing conviction that Yellowstone harbors a darkness beyond our comprehension, a darkness that is as ancient as the mountains themselves. Every detail of that foggy October night is etched into my memory, a constant reminder that some mysteries in the wild are meant to remain buried, and that sometimes the line between nature and nightmare is disturbingly thin. Pray that by sharing these experiences, we may someday unravel the mystery behind the disappearances, the monstrous skull, and the elusive creature that haunts the heart of Yellowstone. The great outdoors, majestic forests and towering mountains where folks go to clear their minds and find a little peace. But sometimes there is an uneasy quiet between the swaying pines, and sometimes a strange shadow steps forward. Two tales, two corners of the wild, and one unsettling question. What really stalks the forest when we dare to wander too far? I'm not really sure where to start, but I haven't slept since it happened, so maybe writing it all down will help. My name is Tommy, and last month I went camping with my dad and my older cousin Jake in Redwood National Park in California. We'd planned a simple weekend, hike some trails, roast marshmallows, that kind of thing. But stuff got really weird, and I can't stop thinking about it. We set up camp near this place my dad likes by Prairie Creek, not too far from where the elk like to roam. It's usually full of tourists, but it was late in the season, so there weren't many people around. The first day, everything was fine, kind of boring even, except I kept feeling like the woods were too quiet. My cousin just said, I watched too many scary movies. The second night, around sunset, I heard this low grunting sound. I thought it might be a deer or maybe a bear sniffing around, but then the sound got deeper, like a growl that vibrated in my chest. My dad shined a flashlight around, but we didn't see anything except these huge footprints in the muddy part near our tents. They were shaped kinda like a person's foot, except they were super wide and way too long. I remember my dad telling me to keep my voice down because he wasn't sure what made them. Jake tried to measure them with his size 12 boot, and they were almost twice as big. All night, I couldn't sleep. My heart was pounding like crazy, and every snap of a branch made me jump. Sometime around 2 a.m., we heard this weird yell echo through the trees. It wasn't a coyote, and it definitely wasn't a bear. It sounded almost like a howl, but deeper, scarier. Dad said he'd heard rumors about Bigfoot sightings in these parts, but I didn't think it was real. Not until then. In the morning, we went looking around to see if we could find more footprints or maybe something else. We found some big broken branches high up in a tree, like maybe something tall had snapped them. Then we talked to a ranger who was checking the trails. He said he hadn't seen anything, but he seemed nervous when we mentioned the prints. He quickly changed the subject and said we should stay closer to the main paths. That afternoon, a local guy named Mr. Larson wandered by our camp. He said he'd seen something huge and dark near his campsite the night before, standing between the redwoods, almost blending in with the tree trunks. He was scared stiff, and he left early that morning. He told my dad that folks around here have legends about a big hairy creature, sometimes called Oma, sometimes just known as the Redwood ape. But Mr. Larson whispered that some of the native tribes in Northern California talk about it differently, like it can be mean, not just a shy creature. He said sometimes these things are tied to curses or evil spirits. I felt a chill run through me when he said that, because the air felt thick, like the woods were hiding a dark secret. Later that evening, we heard rustling again. Dad and Jake quietly stepped out of the tent. I peeked through a crack in the zipper. Under the moonlight, I saw a silhouette, a giant shape, maybe 7 or 8 feet tall, super broad shoulders, covered in dark hair. It stood at the edge of our campsite, just breathing. It sounded like heavy, raspy breaths. Then it let out this deep growl that made my chest hurt. Suddenly, it turned and disappeared into the trees like it had just melted away. Jake wanted to follow it, but Dad said, "No way, we're not going after some huge unknown creature in the dark." That night, none of us slept. We kept hearing weird rustles and low growls from time to time. By morning, we decided we'd head out early. But as we were packing up, something crazy happened. 2 big black SUVs rolled up, and these men in dark outfits stepped out. They didn't look like normal park rangers at all. They had no badges, no clear insignia. They told us to leave the area immediately, said there was a bear problem or something. But they were obviously lying. I saw them unloading something like a big cage or crate from their truck, like they were on some secret mission. My dad asked if we should be worried, and one of them just said in a low voice that the situation was under control. That's all. No explanation. We were still driving out when we passed another spot on the road and saw them again. There were like 4 men, and they were carrying something large, wrapped in a tarp, out of the woods. It was shaped kinda like a person, but way bigger, like extra tall. My cousin swears he saw a hairy arm hanging out from under the tarp. I felt sick to my stomach, like we'd stumbled onto something we weren't supposed to see. Dad sped up, and we didn't say a word for the rest of the drive home. For the next few days, I kept having nightmares about those footprints and that growl, and especially about that thing they were carrying, wrapped up like a secret they didn't want anyone to know about. I tried talking to some friends at school, but they just said I was making it up or watched too many scary shows. Even my dad won't talk about it much. He says we should drop it, that maybe it's safer not to ask questions. I've read enough stories to know that the government or some secret group sometimes steps in when stuff like this happens. All I know is something evil, something big, is out there in the redwood forests. People see it, they hear it, and then strange men come and make it disappear. It gives me the worst chills ever. I can't go camping without thinking about those huge footprints and that feeling of being watched by something that has no business being real. They say the woods around Mount Hood have a certain hush about them, a stillness that whispers stories older than any trail map. And if you listen closely, so they say, you might hear a branch snap in a rhythm that chills your blood, or catch a glimpse of something half-glimpsed, half imagined. Tonight, we explore a most unusual encounter, as seen through the eyes of one unwitting camper who ventured far off the beaten path, only to discover that some secrets are better left in the shadows. June 2023, I went on a camping trip in the Mount Hood National Forest in Oregon with my friends Miles and Carla. We'd planned it all out, picking a spot near Trillium Lake, but far enough from the crowds. We were hoping for some fishing, maybe a short hike up to one of the lesser-known waterfalls. It was supposed to be peaceful. That first day was totally normal. The air smelled like pine needles, the sun was bright, and we took a nice walk around the lake. Then, as dusk set in, Carla said she felt like we were being watched. Miles joked that she was just being paranoid because we were away from city lights, but I started noticing how every time we'd stop talking, the woods seemed silent. Like no crickets, no birds, just nothing. I'm from Portland originally, and even at night in the forest you usually hear something. This was like a vacuum. Later that evening, we heard footsteps circling our campsite, heavy and slow, crunching leaves. We called out, thinking maybe it was another camper lost, but there was no reply. Miles and I shinned our flashlights into the trees, didn't see a thing. The steps faded away, and Carla said she had goosebumps all over. I did too, but I didn't want to admit it. The next morning, we hiked up a side trail near Little Zigzag Falls, wanting to get away from the main tourist spots. The entire hike, we couldn't shake this feeling that something huge was pacing us, staying just out of sight. We stopped to rest by the waterfall, and that's when we found footprints in the mud. Like a person's, only bigger, with toes that looked weirdly spaced. I know Bigfoot prints are rumored to be huge, but these looked off somehow. Narrower, with a deeper heel impression, like it walked on the balls of its feet. Carla pointed out how one of the prints seemed to have 4 toes, while the next one had 5. That gave me a weird chill. Miles tried to say maybe it was an odd deformity in the foot, or maybe 2 different animals overlapped prints, but none of us really believed that. The tension in the air was real. We headed back to camp, trying to laugh it off. That night was worse. We heard a low noise, like a growl, but also sort of a breathy moan somewhere near the tree line. Our fire was pretty bright, so we hoped whatever it was would leave us alone. Then, Carla gasped and grabbed my arm. She was staring at the edge of the woods, the beam of her flashlight dancing between tree trunks. For a second, I saw something tall, hunched behind a massive cedar. It looked like it had broad shoulders covered in dark, scraggly hair, but its posture was wrong, almost twisted. I couldn't see its face, but I saw an eye shine this eerie, dull red reflection. We didn't sleep much that night. Every couple of hours, we heard branches snapping like they were being bent or twisted apart. Once, we heard a sound I can only describe as a grunt that ended in this weird clicking noise. Miles kept the fire going until dawn, because none of us wanted to be in the dark. The next day, we were all pretty spooked. We talked about packing up early, but decided to stay one more night, figuring we might just be overreacting to normal forest noises. We met a local woman named Linda at a small grocery store in Government Camp when we went to get supplies. She was older, maybe in her 60s. She saw how freaked out we looked and asked if we were camping. We nodded, and she asked if we'd seen it. When we pressed her, she just said the woods around Mount Hood have their own watchers. Not exactly Bigfoot, but something else that folks don't talk about too loudly. She said years ago, a friend of hers vanished near Timberline Trail, leaving only footprints that ended in the middle of nowhere. That friend was never found. Back at camp, we found fresh footprints near the ashes of our fire, bigger than any from the day before. I swear they were closer to human shape, but far too large, with toes longer than mine. And I wear a size 10 in women's shoes, so I'm no petite thing. The sense of dread was crazy strong by then, like the forest itself was warning us to get out. That final night, something truly horrible happened. We were sitting around the fire again when Carla whispered that she saw eyeshine. We turned, and I caught a glimpse of a face, like a Bigfoot, but different, almost more human, but contorted in this hateful expression. The eyes were sunken, the jaw was slack, and it had patches of hair missing on its arms and chest. Its smell, like damp fur mixed with something foul, hit us in a wave. For a moment, I felt raw fear, like my body froze up. Miles tried to call out, telling it to leave us alone, but that only made it snarl. It was definitely a snarl too, like a dog's but deeper with a raspy edge. Then it just melted back into the darkness. I could barely breathe. We left before sunrise, practically throwing our gear into the trunk. On the drive out, we stopped at a gas station near Welch's, and an attendant there overheard us talking. She told us she wasn't surprised, that folks sometimes come back from those deeper trails with stories of a cursed Bigfoot, one that had been shot at by loggers in the 70s and somehow changed, more hostile, more cunning. She said some people think it's possessed, or maybe it's just older than the rest, carrying scars from humans. But she insisted it gave off an evil vibe none of the usual Sasquatch stories describe. We never planned on telling anyone beyond close friends, but the nightmares won't stop. I can't shake the memory of that contorted face, like it was almost resentful of our presence. And the footprints. They were so strange. We even found one cast someone else had left behind near a trash bin at the campsite, but none of the rangers admitted to knowing who made it. The official stance was that it's probably a hoax or a misidentification of a bear. But I've seen bear tracks. That was no bear. I don't know what's out there, but I do know it felt wrong, like the forest had turned on us. If you listen to your instincts, you can feel it. A heavier air, a tension in the back of your neck. They say if you wander too far from the safe and the familiar, you might stumble upon things best left undiscovered. In the murky underworld of Kentucky's endless caverns, a hidden hatch in New Mexico's desert backcountry, and a mysterious gathering in Montana's silent plains, 3 travelers each found themselves toe-to-toe with unsettling secrets. Ancient rituals, cryptic strangers, and hushed warnings. Reminders, perhaps, that the heartland of America holds far more shadows than meets the eye once night creeps in. And now, they're sharing their stories, hoping someone might shed light on the darkness that still keeps them awake. They say the wide-open prairies of eastern Montana can hide 1,000 stories in the sea of grass. Rolling hills, scattered ranches, and an endless sky. Peaceful enough until, one night, a quiet traveler stumbles upon something that doesn't quite belong. Sometimes, it's what we don't see in those wide horizons that haunts us the most. I was driving north from Belfourche, South Dakota, aiming to meet a friend near Ekalaka, Montana. A simple route, nothing too complicated, just miles of 2-lane highway and fields dotted with grazing cattle. I'm not even sure where to begin, because it feels like an odd fever dream stitched together from too many late-night documentaries. But I swear, every moment of this happened. I reached the Montana border right after sunset, which in hindsight was my first mistake. I should have arrived before dark. I stopped briefly in Alzada, a tiny unincorporated place that's basically a curve in the road with a bar, a post office, and not much else. I'd planned to top off my tank, but the one pump looked out of order. A local fella on a porch across the way gave me a glance like he'd seen enough strangers for a lifetime. I had half a tank left, so I figured I'd push on. I got back on Highway 323, expecting it to be empty for the next hour or so. The night sky was incredible, unbelievable spread of stars, the kind that make you feel a little small. A while later, around 9:30 or so, I spotted a side road that wasn't on my map, just a dirt track, cutting off into the darkness. Sometimes I get curious, especially out in big sky country. I thought maybe it was a scenic overlook, or a ranch road that had let me see a different angle of the horizon. So I slowed down, turned in, and the moment my tires hit that gravel, it felt like crossing an invisible line. I drove for about 10 minutes, not really seeing much except silhouettes of distant buttes and the outline of old fence lines. Then, I noticed a flicker of light, just a tiny glow, like a lantern or a campfire, off to my left. I pulled over, shut off my engine, and tried to figure out what I was looking at. The light was faint, but it moved a bit, like people were carrying it around. I was debating heading back to the main road when I heard voices, low, hushed, but definitely more than one person. I couldn't make out the words. Maybe it was just a group of ranchers or campers, though it was a strange spot for a camp. But there was something unnerving about the way the light danced, bobbing slightly, as if whoever was holding it was pacing in a tight circle. My gut told me to leave, but my curiosity got the best of me. I grabbed my flashlight and walked maybe 50 yards closer, half crouching behind some scraggly sagebrush. The wind was picking up, swirling dust around my ankles. That's when I saw more lights flick on, several lanterns or flashlights, revealing about a dozen figures in dark, flowing robes. They stood in a rough circle around something that looked like a low wooden table, or maybe a crude altar. My heart nearly jumped out of my chest. The chanting was soft, rhythmic. I couldn't tell if it was a language or just murmured syllables. I noticed a heavy smell in the air, like burning hair or something foul, and I had to stifle a gag. I know how it sounds, like some B-movie plot, but I was there, crouched behind a bush, fighting the urge to run. The group parted slightly, and I saw an older man in the center holding what appeared to be a carved wooden staff. He lifted it, then slammed it down onto the wooden surface. The chanting stopped dead, and every flashlight and lantern turned toward the direction I was hiding. I've never felt such dread. I ducked lower, half expecting them to charge at me. But they just stood there in utter silence, as if they could sense me, but not pinpoint my location. I figured if I tried to sprint back to my car, they'd see me, for sure. So I inched away, trying to keep my head down. My heart was pounding so hard, I was worried they'd hear it. Just as I got a few yards back, something crunched under my boot. Broken glass, maybe. The group's lights swept my way, and someone shouted. I froze, but the lights kept moving, scanning the area. Another voice barked something that sounded like an order, and the entire circle started spreading out. I took that moment to run. By the time I reached my car, dust was swirling everywhere, and the wind was howling. I threw myself in, locked the doors, fired up the engine. In the rearview mirror, I could see beams of light moving fast, like they were running, trying to catch me. I floored it, fishtailing on the gravel before the tires found traction. I sped back toward the main highway, the entire time expecting a truck to appear in my mirrors, but no one followed. I reached Ekalaka around 11 p.m., found a gas station that was thankfully still open, and just sat in my car for a good 15 minutes trying to calm down. The attendant inside shot me a look that said I probably looked white as a sheet. I asked him if there were any local groups who do night gatherings, and he just shrugged, said folks keep to themselves around here. I pried a bit more, and he muttered something about rumors of robed strangers near Medicine Rocks State Park, but that's miles from where I was. He said sometimes ranchers report weird bonfires on remote properties, but no one digs too deep out of fear of stumbling into something they'd rather not see. The next day, I tried to drive back to that area in daylight, but after an hour of searching, I couldn't find that same dirt road. Everything looked the same: dusty tracks, fence posts, rolling plains. It was like the place had swallowed itself. That evening at a small motel, I overheard someone talking about cults in the region, how they meet in deserted areas and practice who knows what. It's the usual small-town rumor, of course. But the one time I mentioned seeing robes, the guy's face went pale. He said a relative of his once caught sight of a group wearing dark hoods in the countryside near Baker, Montana, and after that, the relative rarely left home at night. I left Ekalaka the following morning, telling myself I was just relieved to be putting distance between me and that memory. But I couldn't shake the image of that group standing around that table, or the way they moved like they were rehearsing an old routine, something ancient and practiced. I felt almost guilty for seeing it, like I'd violated a boundary. On my last night in Montana, in a motel near Miles City, I tried to do some quick online searches about robed gatherings in southeastern Montana. Nothing substantial came up, just some talk about fringe religious sects and a few conspiracies referencing government cover-ups of desert cults, all too vague to tie anything directly to what I saw. I did read an article about missing livestock in Carter County, though, with no culprit found. That was enough to make me lose my appetite. I drove straight home the next day, half expecting an unfamiliar vehicle to tail me all the way. I'm sharing this because it's been eating at me. If anyone else traveling through southeastern Montana encountered something like that, I'd feel less insane. The robed figures, the chanting, the abrupt hush, it still wakes me up in cold sweats. It's not like I can tell a friend or coworker about this without sounding like I made up a ghost story. But I'm telling you, I was there. I heard them. And I think they almost heard me too. If something like this has happened to anyone else, or if folks around there know more about these gatherings, let me know. Maybe the less we keep these things in the dark, the better. They say it's the quiet ones you have to watch out for, and in Kentucky's rolling hills, past the neat rows of farmland and gentle slopes, something far from quiet stirs beneath the surface. Down in the caves and hollows where sunlight rarely reaches, whispered rumors hint at a secret that might be even darker than the limestone tunnels winding below. I was in Cave City, Kentucky, just outside Mammoth Cave National Park, late in June 2023. The plan was to take a short vacation, see the caves, maybe rent a canoe and float a portion of the Green River. Nothing fancy. I've always been drawn to the eerie hush of underground caverns, the cool air drifting through rock corridors. Everything was normal at first. I toured the historic entrance of Mammoth Cave, with the park rangers guiding us through the well-lit paths. There were families, retirees, the usual crowd. After the tour, I wandered off on one of the trails near the visitor center, just wanting to clear my head. That's when I noticed a small, unmarked dirt path branching away from the main route. It looked more like a wildlife track than anything else. Curiosity got the better of me. I walked for maybe 15 minutes, snapping pictures of the forest canopy above. It was muggy, and the cicadas were droning loudly. Then, all of a sudden, the woods fell quiet, as if someone had flipped a switch. No birds, no insects, just silence. It was unnerving, to say the least. I saw a faint opening in the distance, like another cave entrance. This area wasn't part of any official tour. I took a few hesitant steps closer, and that's when I heard the distant echo of voices, low and steady. Could have been chanting, or maybe just muffled conversation. But it had a rhythm to it that made my skin prickle. I tried to reason it away. Maybe it was just a group of adventurous locals exploring a hidden cave. Then I caught a whiff of something foul, like decay mixed with damp earth. It hit me so hard I had to step back. I decided to hightail it out of there, but on my way back, I thought I heard twigs snapping behind me. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting a deer. Instead, I caught a glimpse of a tall figure in dark clothing. They vanished behind a tree as soon as I turned around. By the time I made it back to a more traveled path, I was practically jogging. Later that evening, I tried mentioning to the motel clerk that I might have stumbled on an unofficial part of the cave system. She gave me a strange look. She asked if I'd been near the Forbidden Holes, which apparently is local slang for some sealed-off cave entrances in the park's outskirts. She muttered something about rumors of a cult that uses those caverns for gatherings, and that a few people have gone missing over the years. Then she quickly changed the topic, clearly uncomfortable. I couldn't let it go. I spent the next day kayaking down a calm stretch of the Green River, and halfway through, I came across a group of college kids who said they'd heard stories of cannibal cults rumored to be hiding in the deeper sections of Mammoth Cave. Tales from the early 20th century that never really died. It was obviously local lore, or so I wanted to believe. But a few of them swore that park rangers sometimes block off certain trails with no explanation, and that folks occasionally spot official-looking vehicles well off the main roads at odd hours of the night. That same night, I drove to a local bar in Park City to see if I could talk to more people. I got into a conversation with a guy who claimed he used to work for an excavation crew contracted by a government agency. He wouldn't name the agency, but he hinted they were doing subterranean surveys near Mammoth Cave, searching for abnormalities. He stopped talking when I tried to get specifics. It was like he'd said too much already. He left in a hurry, leaving me more perplexed than before. Back at my motel, I kept replaying what I'd heard, and an uneasy dread settled in my gut. I opened my laptop to do a bit of research, but the Wi-Fi was spotty. I recalled reading somewhere that Mammoth Cave is the world's longest cave system, with miles and miles still unexplored. The idea that a hidden cult could use uncharted chambers isn't entirely off the table, especially if they knew the layout better than any official guide. And if it was a cannibal cult or something similarly horrific, maybe the hush-hush presence of a government agency was there to keep it under wraps. The thought made my skin crawl. The next morning, I explored a more established trail, hoping to see if I could find any sign of the path I'd stumbled upon before. No luck. Everything looked the same: thick undergrowth and towering hardwoods. I did see a park ranger parked along the gravel road, so I pulled over, asked about any restricted cave entrances. She was polite but evasive, saying certain areas are blocked off for conservation reasons or due to safety hazards. She didn't mention a cult, obviously, but the way she avoided eye contact when I pressed just amplified my suspicion that something else was going on. That afternoon, I decided to drive around the perimeter of the park. I ended up near Nolan Lake, where a cluster of summer cabins dotted the shore. I spoke with a cabin owner who told me some bizarre story about how his grandfather once saw a group of robed figures sneaking into a cave along the lake's edge late at night. He said the next day they found remnants of a slaughtered deer near the entrance, with strange symbols carved into the hide. He laughed it off as an old wives' tale or local ghost story, but he admitted he's never hiked alone after dark, just in case. I was torn between thinking all of this was some elaborate local legend and genuinely fearing that I'd brushed up against something horrifyingly real. On my last evening, I returned to that original trail, part of me wanting closure. As dusk settled, the forest took on that same oppressive quiet. I forced myself to walk until I reached a fallen log that I recognized as near where I smelled that awful stench. But the log was gone, rolled aside, or maybe dragged. The path was clearer, almost like someone had cleared it on purpose. I felt too exposed, imagining eyes on me from every shadow. I got out of there as fast as I could. Since then, I've gone down internet rabbit holes about rumored cults in rural America, especially in cave systems. Many of the stories are vague, of course, often secondhand. But a few details match up eerily with my experience: the robed figures, the foul odors near hidden cave entrances, even claims of local law enforcement turning a blind eye for fear of government interference or something else. I don't know how much is real, or how much is folklore that latches onto a place as mysterious as Mammoth Cave. All I can say is, I left Kentucky with a heavy feeling that I'd stumbled too close to a secret that's best left alone. Whether it's a genuine cannibal cult, some fringe group performing dark rituals, or just a string of coincidences fueled by old legends, I can't shake the memory of those muffled voices echoing from the cave entrance. And the figure in the woods, whoever they were, clearly didn't want company. I'm hoping maybe someone else has had a similar brush with the unknown in that region, or has heard rumors of some government involvement. If nothing else, maybe it'll serve as a warning. New Mexico, land of enchantment, of endless skies and stories that stretch just as far. But somewhere between the desert and the mountains, tucked away in a place most maps don't bother to mark, one man stumbled onto something buried, something that wasn't meant to be found. I don't really know how to start this, except to say that if I never go back to Dulce, New Mexico, it'll be too soon. I don't even know how much of this I should be sharing, but I figure your YouTube channel is the right place for it. Someone out there has to know more about this than I do. This happened in September 2023. I was on my way from Farmington down toward Chama, taking the long route through the Jicarilla Apache Reservation because I'd always been curious about the area. I'd read stories about Dulce Base, the underground facility that supposedly houses some top-secret military experiments, but I never actually believed in any of it. Not the aliens, not the human experiments, not the deep tunnels stretching beneath Archuleta Mesa. Just wild conspiracy theories, or so I thought. But the thing is, when you drive into Dulce, you start to get the feeling that people know something you don't. It's small, less than 3,000 people, but there's this heavy atmosphere, like a town that's waiting for something. And maybe that something has already happened, and nobody's talking about it. I stopped for gas at a little place just outside town. No name on the sign, just a weathered old Phillips 66 logo. I went inside to grab a drink, and the guy behind the counter, an older man with deep lines in his face, asked where I was headed. When I told him I was just passing through, he kind of squinted at me like he was deciding something. Then he said, real low, "Stay on the main road." That was it. Now, I probably should have listened. But I've always been the kind of person who hears something like that and immediately wonders what happens if I don't. So, I drove around the outskirts of Dulce for a while, looking at the mesas, the valleys stretching out toward the Colorado border. The land out there feels untouched. Like whatever's been through there left it exactly as it was, without disturbing a thing. I noticed an old dirt road branching off Highway 64. No signs, no markers. It looked barely traveled. My first thought was that it might lead to an old mining site, or maybe a ranch road. I pulled off and started down it. About a mile in, I realized I hadn't seen another vehicle or house since turning off. Just sagebrush, distant hills, and a sky that felt too big. I kept going, figuring I'd turn around in a bit. Then, out of nowhere, my radio cut to static. Not just a little interference, full-on, ear-piercing static. I reached down to turn it off, and that's when I saw something ahead. There was a break in the land, a sharp drop-off into what looked like a dry wash, and at the bottom of it, a hatch. A metal hatch, half covered in dirt, like it had been there a long time. It was big, maybe 6 feet across, with no markings I could see. Just a simple metal wheel in the center, like something out of an old fallout shelter. I don't know what came over me, but I pulled over and got out. The second my boots hit the dirt, the air felt different, thicker, somehow. like the moment before a storm, except the sky was clear. I walked closer, looking for any signs of who might have put it there. No tracks, no tire marks. The hatch itself was dusty, but solid. I reached out and put my hand on the metal, and it was ice cold, even in the heat. Then I heard something behind me, a low hum, almost like an engine but deeper, vibrating in my chest more than in my ears. I turned fast, expecting to see another car, maybe a rancher or someone coming to tell me I was trespassing. But there was nothing. No wind, no birds, just that hum getting louder. I've never felt true fear before. Not the kind that locks up your limbs and makes you feel like you're standing at the edge of something you were never supposed to see. But that's what happened. I took one step back, then another, and as soon as my foot hit the edge of the dirt road, the hum stopped. Silence, like it had never been there at all. So what's a little hidden hatch in the middle of nowhere? Just a bit of forgotten history, or something more. A door that leads to nothing, or a door that should never, ever be opened. My dear watchers, your presence is a gift. Thank you for your time, your curiosity, your courage. But remember, there are others who wander, unaware of the dangers that await. By liking this video and subscribing, you offer them a light in the darkness. Support our channel and keep the stories coming, simply by giving a thumbs up and subscribing and sharing.